Cool. Yeah, me and Dimitri had a few items on our agenda that we talked about, but we didn't make a ton of progress on them. And it's hard problems. I don't know exactly where to end up, but it's multidisciplinary. And I think it's worth kind of spending some time on it to see whether there's actionable things we can do. And the overarching theme is like, how do we get to a lovable user experience? And I think if you go from DIY DevOps to GitLab as a DevOps platform, it's already like a giant improvement in user experience. So we got that kind of new category win in user experience because you get it all in a single application. Now, within that single application, I think like the user experience is middle of the pack, and our ambition is more, but I'm not sure how to get there. Like I think all the individual functions are doing the best they can, and they're competent and they're well intentioned and they pay attention to it. But it feels like, hey, maybe there's something more, and that's why I invited a broad group. And maybe Dimitri, maybe you want to walk us through a few of the agenda items, like 1, 2, 3, and there's some others. I saw people already commented. You want to kind of walk us through number 2, Dimitri?
Yeah. So I'll just explain to everyone what I did. So in 2020, I tried to set up GitLab and use the features like this auto DevOps, complete auto DevOps process as from a user perspective. So let's say I see the GitLab, it's great, I want to try it out. So I did once I did with downloading packages, installing it, like setting up all the features that I want, and actually making some sample project that I want to push, configure, deploy, and so on. Another time I did it with GitLab.com, but the idea is the same. It's reviewing the experience from a user perspective as a whole, right? Like as for example, you have some sample project, something closer to real. For example, a blog, yeah, and you want to see how you can actually have it running with GitLab.com, like everything from creating a project, importing it, creating issues like containers, testing, deployment, SaaS, Dust, like the whole thing. And when you do that, you see there are like certain gaps between categories, and sometimes there are really obvious issues that are easy to fix. And I did that in around 2 years ago, and there was like quite a few issues, quite a few low-hanging fruits that we fixed. Both point 2 and point 3 are the documents that describing my experience. And probably what we want here is that, like, okay, how we can get the same effect, how we can solve this misconnection between categories, how we can perceive and improve the product as a whole on, like, on a regular basis, like, not maybe automated, but yeah, how we can make this a thing.
Yeah, one thing I think is worth noting here that would be different from 2 years ago is that no part of Auto DevOps has been updated to target the Kubernetes agent yet. So if you're using the Kubernetes agent, which is the recommended solution right? I think we're effectively considering the legacy cluster integration deprecated. The auto DevOps experience effectively doesn't exist once you get to like the deploy stage and the monitor stage. Yeah, like from my experience, there was a time when auto DevOps would take you end to end, particularly with the cluster integration, and you had a really great experience, including like stuff like pod logs and the deploy dashboards. So I think we need to put a fair amount of time into making auto DevOps work again with the Kubernetes agent.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So, like in a way, we say on the website that was like we have a DevOps platform and auto DevOps system, like in a way contribute to this messaging. So I don't know, maybe we need to people responsible for this. Maybe we need some initiative. Maybe it should be cross group. I'm not a manager. I don't know how structured is suggested, but I feel like there can be an improvement here.
Yeah, what I had recently had a meeting, and in the meeting we basically concluded, so we have the certificate-based Kubernetes and the agent-based Kubernetes. And the certificate-based Kubernetes is something that we don't see a future for long term. People have a hard time doing it, and we know we're going to deprecate it in the future. But the agent-based one has way fewer features, and we were reluctant to deprecate the certificate-based because like cluster cost analysis and things like that, and like auto DevOps don't work anymore. But we also kind of realized, as far as I'm concerned, like it's better to deprecate it and to bite that bullet and then have clarity for everyone than kind of pretend that things are there. Well, really it's not future-proof, and we're going to lead people down a path that's not going to be good for them because it doesn't always work. And even if they get it working, we're going to deprecate it in the future. And kind of trying to level up a bit, like it feels like Dimitri does this as a kind of creator of the project, but it feels like there's not, these things don't get surfaced through the organization. Everyone's focused on their part. How do we get also focus on kind of the integral, there's fancier words, but that's that kind of higher level user experience.
So I'll say I agree. I think our product in individual product areas has a good user experience by and large. It is the connections between areas of the product where we are suffering and we are not pulling things together. This is something that UX can surface and help to show how we can do that. So we're very open to doing that. We don't have a KR specifically focused, for example, on doing that for auto DevOps this quarter or this upcoming quarter, but the quarter hasn't started yet. So if that's the thing we need to go tackle in Q4, we could deprecate one of our existing KRs and replace it with something around this. And then it would be, I think, a multi-designer effort that we'd probably have a staff designer head up to make sure that it all comes together.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's an interesting proposal. I'm really focused on kind of doing this for the long term. So this is like totally not urgent, but totally important. And how do we kind of institute it so that it happens without like the CEO or creator of the project raising their hands? For more than 6 months, I was raising my hand like, hey, that documentation selecting between agent and certificate is vague. Like we gotta be more specific. And for 6 months, like, yeah, small improvements. And then you dive into it and like, whoa, we're totally leading people astray. Like, how can we make sure that happens through the product and engineering functions, I think, instead of through top-down things? Because like that's not scalable, and it's also a super bad experience for the people involved.
So my thoughts would be, and if we skip down to Christie's notes here, we've started taking a more data-driven approach to this. So she's got a couple, this is down in 10, a couple of charts here. This is kind of the monthly activity of created and resolved SUS impacting issues. And this is the overall volume, right? So you can see over time, there's really not a lot of change here. There's some monthly activity, but we're just sort of fluttering. You could even argue there's kind of a slow, steady upward trend to this stuff, which means we're sort of accruing this stuff. And then you can see, like, I put examples in here of how we manage things like this at scale. So this is in the infrastructure department, infra dev issues, and then OPIV corrective actions in infrastructure. So when we have the same volume here, we've shown we can be effective driving down the slope pretty dramatically. However, the hard part about that is the trade-offs. So we could do that, but it's going to come at the cost of many other things. And given that we're doing reliability concurrently, it's going to be probably ARR drivers and other sorts of things. But in terms of how we do this at scale, independent of specific hotspots around auto DevOps, I think we would push on this kind of data-driven approach to prioritization. Now, the one thing I would say is that we're just last thought, because we happen to be focused backend, especially on so much of this reliability work, we are in a moment where we've got sort of, I don't want to call it a surplus, but we're looking for what should front end be focused on. Well, they don't necessarily have backend stable counterparts available. And that means they can take a large bite out of the SUS impacting issues, let's say for the next 3 months. And so we could see this presumably bend down if we take that decision, into early next year. And then we get back into the trade-off space of how much are we going to weight or value SUS impacting items versus ARR drivers, continued reliability work, all that sort of stuff. That would be my kind of scaled approach to doing this. And then on a stage by stage or group by group basis, we're going to be doing it well. Some cases we may not be doing it well at the moment in auto DevOps, so we can better detect those hotspots and we can address them. And that's where it's totally welcome to have, point feedback come in of like, hey, what's going on with this one feature set? And we can zoom in there. We can put multiple designers on a temporary basis and cover over those little fires that are sort of burning.
Super helpful. Thank you. I'm not pushing for yesterday it was reliability, tomorrow it should be usability, and then it should be new features, and then we should be more AR, and then it should be fulfillment, and then we'll go through that circle again.
Yeah, agreed.
I do think it's interesting, hey, there's probably some extra front-end capacity right now because backend is focused on reliability. I think that's super interesting, and it's something you should probably run with.
We have been, yeah, it's not new. So we've been scheduling already.
I feel like you were answering the question, how do we make a better user experience? And that's the title of this meeting. So I changed the title to how do we do a more lovable, holistic user experience? I'm not worried about the individual kind of groups making system usability better. We have a history of that, can do a lot better. I'm worried about the people zooming out and doing something from start to finish, from plan to monitor. And I think that's what I've been missing, that not only did we not maybe allocate the work to it, but we're not even creating the issues. So it's not, there's a capacity thing too, but I think it's more the detection and people I don't know, calling bullshit on the end-to-end experience. The end-to-end experience with the agent, we don't have those features. Take them off the homepage.
So I think what's interesting about auto DevOps is that we've historically and continue to do a pretty good job making sure that virtually every feature of the product is in some way encapsulated by auto DevOps, right? If you can get from start to finish with an auto DevOps pipeline, you're using most of the functionality that we have to provide. And I think that should continue to be the case, right? I think the issue is that I'm not aware of a single project that we manage in GitLab that uses the vanilla auto DevOps pipeline, or really even like pieces of it directly. I mean, maybe like a container build, right? But that's about as like sophisticated as like a reusable component that we use. So I think it would be hard to get projects to use vanilla auto DevOps directly, but that probably speaks to like us needing to make improvements on the auto DevOps side, you know?
I think there's a couple things going on. One, we see some usage of auto DevOps, but not a lot, because most companies want more flexibility in how their workflows. And so the PM team, and Victor in particular, I think likes the concept of DevOps, but it needs much more customizability for it to be usable. And so I think bottom line, he's veering away from re-implementing auto DevOps such as it exists, but rather rethinking it now that we have the agent. So that makes it a lower priority, and that's one reason why the team wasn't all over this. There are areas where we are sure that they're contributing to SUS and that we need a lot of focus on it. I listed those in 9. And so I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of focus on certain areas. This is one where we didn't have a lot of focus, perhaps part oversight. I think some of it is due to viewing it as a lower priority because it may not be the way forward. One thing we have, Christy's got researchers, and so what we've done is identify cross-stage jobs, and they've done a nice job of researching those and logging what we need to do to improve it. We can continue to do that. Product leadership has some responsibility here. We haven't done as much as I would like in terms of outlining cross-stage strategic direction, but we're doing more of it. And there's a lot of PM to PM activity that we weren't seeing 6 to 9 months ago. So I feel like the team knows this is important and is starting to connect some of the dots in ways that they weren't 9 months ago. So I'm optimistic the team is thinking about it. We haven't benefited from it as much as we will in a couple of quarters, in my opinion.
If we go from auto DevOps on top, so as Sid mentioned, it's more about detection. Like, for example, if I take just a full stack engineer and say him like, here is a GitLab, like, go through it as a user and like detect all the stupid things or like irrelevant things or like, all these problems that you face and report them. Yeah, there would be some certain amount of issues, right? So if you work on just one particular thing on already existing project, you won't notice those, those breaches being broken. So I think what I'm wondering is how we can actually, make this detection happen without, hiring a person saying like, hey, imagine you are Dmitry, imagine you care about the product, like go do everything that the user is supposed to do and create an issue for everything between the stages, between the features that you feel like it's not great.
I think we do have that institutionalized to some extent. That's in part UX research, and what they found is that they've confirmed that sort of holistic problem. In particular, it's learning the holistic as opposed to doing the holistic. When people learn it, they can do it to some extent. It could still be more elegant, but learning how to do it, that upfront barrier is the most significant thing. So Christy, maybe I know you have thoughts on learnability. Maybe you could kind of outline what you've found and how close we are to turning it into like a set of actionable items that we could execute.
Yeah, I'll say a little bit, but I'll actually turn it over to Adam because he really has more information on this than anyone. But yes, we have found that learnability is the biggest problem that users have with our product. Even when we did comparative research against other tools, the result was that our learnability is poorer than those competitors. Adam did qualitative research. So we did this quantitative survey-based research, but he also did qualitative research where he went and spoke with users and did a longitudinal study and actually followed them as new users. And they had a lot of feedback on this as well. So let me turn this over to Adam.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wrapping up that research now, but some of the main insights here are just, it's not very easy for people to learn because there's not a whole lot of resources out there for what they want to learn in their own environments. So it takes them a lot of time to try to find what they're looking for, a lot of failures along the way. And it takes a lot more time than originally planned also. So a lot of people feel like they're almost on their own trying to figure this out. They have to ask their coworkers, which takes time away from their job. And yeah, that's it at a very high level.
It's interesting because if using auto DevOps as the example, even if it's not our priority, I think the heart of auto DevOps is it's a guided experience through these multiple parts of our product, which apparently did well with certificate-based, is not doing well with the agent-based, but that right there is a learnability problem. So it's almost like, I know it's not a wizard, but you almost think about it like a wizard. Like I have this problem I want to solve. It's a wizard that just kind of guides me through. And I just say like, this is what I want to do. And by the end of it, it's taking me through the steps and there I am. Today, what's happening is somebody goes, oh, I want to do this. And they go, okay, well, I'll go do this little part here. And then I go do this other little part over there. And there just aren't those connections between those things. And I think it's not just obviously auto DevOps. I think that's a really good example, but I think this is true about many, many, many different jobs that people are trying to do in our product.
So Adam, like having, let's suppose we've correctly characterized the issue. How close are we to having the fixes captured in issues? We have this chart of the sus impacting open close issues each month. So I see those purple bars, but like, how close are we to feeling like, okay, we've got the backlog laid out for improving that holistic experience, and we can start to actually prioritize and execute some of those issues?
I think we're fairly close to understanding a little bit about what we have to do. I do think it will take a significant amount of work.
Is it something where we could enroll like the engineering managers and the PMs? Because like what I'm getting at here is like DZ has a very simple, elegant solution to this, which is, himself or someone like him goes through the app, but we have to scale that to, 1,400 people organization level. And I just want to make sure we follow that through from research into action. So like what would be the tactical next steps for taking that learning and turning it into like, okay, these stage groups are going to execute these set of issues?
I think it would be a partnership with engineering and product for sure. Kirsty, I just saw you unmuted.
Adam and Valerie, I'm going to say something, and Tori too, because you're here as well. So if you disagree with what I'm about to say no, I think you're wrong. So we work a lot from jobs to be done. That's in a partnership with product, which has been a massive improvement for us as an R&D team. But the jobs to be done that we're focused on right now really are more tactical. They are more at the stage group level. Now, again, huge improvement over where we were in the past, where we didn't have jobs to be done. We were so feature focused. What we haven't done yet is pulled up to more macro jobs to be done. So how do those stage group level jobs to be done come together to actually say like, okay, now this is a job that I'm trying to complete across the product? That is a change that we could make together as an R&D team, identify what those jobs to be done are, and then that gives something for PM and UX and development to come together on and say, okay, now we know like these are the top 5 most important jobs. This team's going to handle this one. This team's going to handle that one. But I will say in transparency, we don't have that today. That is something that we would need to go figure out.
I would agree with that, Christy. And I will one-up you. In a previous role that I had, we ran into a lot of quality issues within the product we were working on. And We did just that, and we did something similar to a heuristic evaluation at that for those higher level ones that you just talked about, where we would actually vote on the quality of that user experience. So we would have about 5 to 10 people, and somebody would drive through that whole experience end to end, and using a set of heuristics, we would vote on how we felt about the quality of that experience. And it would also reveal a lot of low-hanging fruit, and also some things for the teams to work on.
And that sounds like it was cross-functional. So you're getting UX opinions, you're getting PM opinions, you're getting engineering opinions. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So I'd say so that sounds interesting, but GitLab being GitLab, we're kind of like Dr. House. If people remember that Hugh Laurie show, he was the diagnostician, and he'd always order the test and order the treatment at the same time in parallel. So I would say, like, let's just, DZ knows the project well, just get his list of top 5 things, start addressing those as jobs to be done. And then the same in parallel, start assessing our own sense of jobs to be done. And maybe that ends up reprioritizing the list. We'll end up with a big list of jobs to be done, but like, why not just go with DZ's instincts for now, and we can get started quicker.
Yeah, and let's start calling it, like, let's start calling about that higher level, talking about that higher level. So I just changed the title of the doc for another time, Loveable Macro User Experience, because I haven't seen UX research assist with the things that I think are causing a lot of damage compared to how easy they are, or well, how easy, but compared to the effort to fix them. And then thinking of things like the installation experience, the auto DevOps experience, the certificate versus agent-based mess in the documentation. We haven't seen UX research there. And I think that is what Christy said is probably spot on. We went from features to jobs to be done, but UX research has not helped with the macro. So we need help there. Another thing that I'd love to see a lot more is kind of trying to like have a shorter cycle time between finding the problem and fixing it. And it doesn't mean that all the UX researchers have to be back-end engineers, but we got to start seeing that it's inefficient to find a problem, write it up, for someone to pick that up 3 months later and fix it. That is inefficiency right there. If you can relay that faster, if you can close that cycle time, it's beneficial. So almost, we say our product helps with cycle time. We're not practicing it from UX research to getting things fixed. It's almost like maybe some of the UX research stuff, we shouldn't even do the write-up, because it falls below a certain threshold. And we see maybe some of it, the UX researchers should help. I know they're not always back-end engineers, but maybe there's documentation, or maybe we pair them with the programmer and they just go start fixing things in the product together in co-working sessions. But I do want to fix the finding to fix cycle time, because I think it's creating a lot of inefficiency.
I'm not under the impression that we're doing research that's been taking months and months and months and months to create the issues, because we have a massive backlog of issues coming out.
No, it creates the issues, but then before right. I'm talking about issue creation to issue fix. Yeah. And like, if you pair with someone, sometimes you don't even have to write up the issue. You save time on both sides.
Yeah, and I do think that's what's happening is we're creating the issues. They're falling into a stage group's domain, and then they're just kind of sitting there. I'm going to propose something, and y'all may all go, you're crazy, but I'll say it out loud anyway. I mean, yeah, DZ, I trust that you're going through the product and you're using it and you're seeing things that you're like, yeah, this just needs to get fixed. An approach would be to pair a very senior designer, by very senior, I mean like by staff plus, with DZ, and basically make them just a team where DZ is guiding the strategy of this is what we should be focused on. The designer is digging in with, and they just partner and fix stuff.
I think that's spot on. And that's what I was thinking about too. Pairing kind of senior people, a senior researcher or designer with a senior back-end front-end developer, maybe a couple of three, but I think a pair can be great, and go do things together so that we shorten that cycle time, that we shorten kind of the information that gets lost by somebody writing it up and then someone reading it months later. The things that are not relevant anymore, the lack of motivation if you have a long cycle time. Like, we know what the effects of a long cycle time are. And then it's not about pairing with DZ, it's about getting rid of the dependency on DZ and me as bottleneck, as the people who do this. We shouldn't be the ones doing this. And very soon we won't be the ones doing this. So we need, and actually there should be a lot more of this. Like it should happen more frequently. So I'm not sure what form it should take, but I can see things like, oh, that week I'm on what is it? Macro duty. And macro duty means I'm going to pair either front end or a back ender with either a researcher or a designer. And we're gonna dive into a macro case and try to fix as much as we can. And we're not going to leave any issues. We might leave issues behind, but that's not the goal. The success rate is seen as how much we fixed in that week.
And it's not about, DZ, but if you have two senior people working on this, they have a better understanding of the product in general, of all those between stages, connections, and everything. So in the end, they will produce a better product. Like, you can't clone me, that, and the more you tie this around me, the worse the outcome, So ideally, we want more people be aware of the product as a whole,
I think that would be super positive for the designers. We've done a lot of KRs that have been focused on getting designers working outside of their own stage groups because we want to build that end-to-end product knowledge. I will tell you that today, that is not a strength in the department. Our designers are experts in the areas that they support. They know some about the areas around that. And when you start, like the further you start getting out from that, the less they know. But that's how they learn, is they go in and they experience different product areas. They would need guidance though to do that. But a very senior engineer, be it DZ or someone else, like that is how they learn.
Yeah, I'd say we have probably a surplus of people able and willing to do this on the development side. So like Stan, Camille, Shay Gorsh, Philippe, and then we just need to figure out the pairings on the stable counterparts on the UX side. And over time, the UXers that are, I think right now the most senior individual contributors we have in UX is staff, but the people that are successful doing this, that becomes a case to justify higher levels and eventually promotions. It can become more and more of a formalized role.
Sid and DZ, under 9, I added some of the big rocks that I thought were negative sus drivers. They're all pretty macro-y. Do you agree with those? Would you add to the list, or do you think some of the ones you mentioned, Sid, are even more important?
Yeah, I think it's a good list. I don't see how Workspace works with solves the hierarchy problem. Workspace is to get rid of the admin panel and get parity between GitLab.com.
I think one of the underlying
misappropriated. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, one of the underlying building blocks is this thing called a work item. And my understanding is that we'll be able to use that to create a more flexible hierarchy within the product and allow customers to set up their projects and groups in a more
work
flexible.
Item allows you is treating issues and epics the same. Is that work item?
Yes, it enables that. It'll also enable the user. Right now, our hierarchy is pretty pretty rigid about how groups interact with projects and such, and it would allow more flexibility on that. So my understanding is that it's a bit orthogonal, but it unlocks that as well.
I think work item is a completely separate effort than workspace.
Nevertheless, the job to fix is the lack of flexibility in how planning is set up.
Yeah, the planning, the constrictiveness and issues in epics and with the hierarchy is a big problem that work item is gonna fix. So very excited about that.
Cool. So you mentioned a few more. You want to add them to that list so we can make sure we have a comprehensive one. So auto DevOps. What was the other one you mentioned, Cooper?
I think installation experience was on the list.
Yeah.
We still split it up in the small scenes. So we're actually doing the opposite of the, like looking at the picture of the whole in a way. So I think this pairing would be a good thing, because no matter what we list here, the list will change over time, right? But the process, the way how we deal with it stays. So no matter what, like new problems will appear, we just solve them as this one.
I also wonder if we could maybe get more traction on something like that if it were a bit more organic. Like maybe we could have some sort of like specialized UX coffee chat where if an engineer has like subjectively experienced some usability concern, right, or like day to day there's something that they're getting frustrated on, like they have an opportunity to pair directly with a UX researcher or designer and kind of walk through that problem. It would be more informal, but like maybe that would happen more frequently if it wasn't like a designated set of key engineers and a designated set of UX folks.
I suspect, but I don't know, that would probably end up being a more tactical focus based on the feedback that I see coming in broadly from the development department right now. So everybody's got their little nits that they want to pick with the product.
Yeah.
But I don't think that solves the big problem we're talking about here.
Right. It would also, yeah, I mean, it makes the assumption that we're dog fooding everything holistically, which I think we're also not doing, right? And that was something I think that's super relevant to like the macro experience, right? Like we've had the Kubernetes integrations for years now, and I think that's something that no project within GitLab is using in a production capacity, the certificate based or the agent, as far as I know.
Design systems using it currently.
Oh, okay.
The JAMS design system.
I mean, I just want to chime in quickly. I know in past products, what we've done is similar to what Christy was suggesting, of just having this macro level jobs to be done. And then with every feature release and things like that were major and will touch those macro, jobs to be done, there will be an assessment as to whether the overall quality of the jobs to be done is improving or decreasing. So if you find that you're releasing something that touches upon that, jobs to be done, but then maybe it improves one portion of the flow, but disrupts something else, then that would be taken into consideration before launching. And it will also spin off extra work to make sure that overall journey continues to be done. But I think the first step is just like having those jobs to be done and then having a rigor as to how frequently you test for them and who's going to be doing the testing, who's going to be flagging. And maybe even, I know we don't like delaying things, but at least flagging that this release will hurt our macro job and then have a plan to fix it and an SLO to fix those issues.
That's one of the things that I've seen. I think we fall back on the idea of MVC so much that we do put things in the product that we know have deleterious effects on other areas of the product, which theoretically should be okay if, to your point, Omar, we go back and almost immediately fix them. The problem is that we don't. They linger. And that is a cultural shift we'll have to make.
That makes me think of our category maturity. That's not macro, that's micro. And so that might be something that we eventually look at too, is it's great to evaluate the maturity of a particular category, but should we be up leveling that as well?
That's an interesting idea, because you're right, the jobs to be done that we have today are at that category level. If we looked at it from a maturity perspective, then we could just take the approach we've taken with categories today, which is to make sure we have validated jobs to be done for every category, up level that to stage and say, okay, now we have validated jobs to be done for every stage. That still doesn't get us across the product, but the step up from that would be to say, okay, now that we have them for the stages, how do they come together at the product level? So I'm hearing kind of two different things here. So one is, we just have pairings and we just trust people to go in and just start tackling things in teams. The other idea is to more make this a part of our overall processes that we already have in place around things like category maturity and jobs to be done. We could do both. I think, the question from the UX department is going to be, what do we have the appetite for? What can we prioritize based on the resources that we have?
We have some of these in Q4 for OKRs. I recognize they're not complete, but could we test out the pairing concept with one of those, like the MR UX stuff, perhaps?
The only thing we're doing on MRs in Q4 is just finishing the MR widget work that didn't get finished in Q3. So I don't see an opportunity there. I'm trying to think about the UX scorecards. They did not make it above the line, though, when it came to prioritization for OKR. So in Q3, for anyone who doesn't know, in Q3, we had 10 designers go into areas of the product that are unrelated to their current area and do a heuristic review from a learnability perspective of that product area. So one is fresh set of eyes, two was a learning opportunity for them. Coming out of that, they created issues where they said, these are the things that we think need to get fixed. And those do need to be a collaboration with product and engineering, because look, just because the designer said, I think this is a problem, doesn't mean like this is a problem. It means like, okay, now as a team, we got to figure this out. We got to fix the experience. But so yes, potentially on that, but that did not make it above the line for Q4 OKRs.
So I seen the effect of DZ kind of go in and fixing these things, and I think it was super high value creation. So I want to try the macro duty, and then whether you will also want to start measuring usability at a macro level. That's up to the UX department. I have an opinion.
I mean, I think SUS is a macro measurement. So I think we have that. I think one of the things we're missing is this, like that volume graph we talked about of just outstanding issues. I think it's important that we are able to facet that by these holistic items. So I think we need to add that to our label taxonomy, because if we haven't impacted this positively 3 or 6 months from now, we're going to wish we had the data to say, okay, like what issues are the set of holistic issues? How much of those did we actually execute? And if it wasn't enough, why? So I think it would be smart of us to have that in our taxonomy now, if we don't already.
I need to think about that to be able to answer your question about do we have it now, and probably chat with my leaders. And then if not, we can figure something out.
And it's probably its own dimension. I think there's many things that are already categorized as something, but would also count as holistic. So it's not either or. But I think we want to be able to look at if the holistic experience is the most important thing to us and to Sid. I think we need to be able to see that backlog independent of everything else.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at for sure. Yeah, let me work with Adam and Valerie and Tori. So we kind of level set, and then Eric, I will come to you with proposals and questions. I think we'll need your help brainstorming on this.
I also want to highlight that testing is also a part of making sure that it works. And I want to point out we did make some progress in validating the 3 languages of auto DevOps, so Java, Node.js, and Ruby. And we do have the next iteration of coverage there, but that's the reverse of macro. Christian, I'd love to hear what your ideas on the pairings are. I think we fixed it, but then there's also a test that we need to write to make sure we don't regress from the improvements that we made, and how we can prioritize and put effort to that.
No, that's a good point. I'll be honest, I don't have thoughts on the pairings yet. I'm still processing, but yes, I agree with you.
So maybe with just a couple minutes left, if we could just list in number 12, like the action items and the DRIs, who's going to do what?
Okay, so I know one action item for me is to work with my leaders to understand what do we have around holistic user experience today that we can leverage, if anything, and to come back to Eric with proposal and questions so that we can come back with an actual proposal that he approves of.
And Christy, do you have the action on creating this sort of macro duty within UX and pairing with some of the senior development folks?
I think that needs to come up to your level to determine what you are comfortable with. Because I'm not going to come to you and say, I own Stan's time for the next milestone, right? So I think it needs to be a conversation between you and me.
Okay, I'll take that one.
You can feel free to use me as a resource there too, Eric, if you don't want to take engineering time.
Yeah, refresh my memory, Marshall. At NASA, you were using the Helm charts in particular. So where would you say your specialties are?
Yeah, so we built our platform around a fork of Auto DevOps essentially, and we started with just vanilla Auto DevOps and sort of swapped out different pieces. Like one piece that was particularly successful was like our fork of the deploy stage, because the maintenance of the Helm charts and our fork of GitLab's like auto deploy app chart was becoming unmaintainable. So we switched to like customize and kept, and had mechanisms for allowing users to deploy arbitrary Kubernetes resources from their projects, stuff like that. But ultimately, like I was responsible for the whole platform and setting up teams with like security dashboards and trying to do like a best effort thing with Monitor after the GitLab managed app stuff was deprecated and we couldn't use the pod logs anymore. So yeah, I just have a lot of context of like all of the different functionality and a lot of context around Auto DevOps too.
Cool. Yeah, we'll try to use you, but now that you're at GitLab, you're onboarding to GitLab and you're going to be like the rest of us, like too close to the project. So we'll try to get you early while you still have that kind of customer perspective for sure.
Sure.
Nick, I penciled in the burn down chart for SUS impacting. We can take that offline as well if we need that delivered.
There's 12C as well, define macro versus jobs to be done. Whose action item is that? 12C.
I think it depends on what you mean by define. I think if you want the UX department to say, these are the different levels of a job to be done, and this is how you write them, we can be responsible for that. actually defining the jobs to be done, we'll have to have help. When I say defining the jobs to be done, pardon me, explicitly saying this is the job to be done for this particular thing that we are focused on.
So it looks to me like there's kind of 2 action items. So we've got 4 laid out here. So it feels like macro duty is 1, and there's what this process is going to look like, and then the first 5 jobs to be done. So that's kind of like, I would probably just indent these under the first one. And then the second one is, we already have a burn down chart of sus impacting issues. It's just not burning down. I think it's the macro drill down into this.
So, and if you don't mind, what I'll do in 12.2 is actually break those into 2 things. So it's define the different levels of jobs to be done. And I think that Valerie and Adam can do that and add to handbook the actual product focus areas. We are not the ones you want doing that.
Yeah, I can help you with that, Christy.
Thank you.
We're over time. I know you said you had anything else before. No?
Sorry, Omar, what did you say?
No, I was just saying we're over time, so I was to see if you had anything else you wanted to wrap up with.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Great outcome.